In this video, I'm going to talk about the Design tab and the Page Layout tab in Word. If you'll remember from the Home tab, I can start out with these styles. And so, for example, if I choose, let's see, I'm just going to hit Enter there, and I'm going to hit Enter there, and I'm going to say, for example, that this is maybe my title, and this maybe is a subtitle. And so it automatically formats the text there as a title and a subtitle. Well, how does it know exactly what that's supposed to look like? And how can I change the way that looks? To do that, you go over to the Design tab. You'll see the type of theme that's been selected already highlighted for you, and you can scroll over the other options to see what they would look like. So like, for example, this one makes, if I choose that one, it makes the subtitle to be centered. Or if I choose this one, it makes the subtitle a tiny different text and has it left justified, so on and so forth. So I can just highlight over these until I find the one that looks the way that I want it to. Suppose that I like the way this one looks, but I don't like the color of the text. Well, I can control that too by going to this colors drop down. If I scroll over these drop downs, then it gives me a preview of how my text color is going to change depending on which one I pick. So I just scroll through until I see one that I like. How about that lovely purple? And then I'm good to go. Suppose that I like now the colors, and I like the way that this is laid out, where this is italics, where the subtitle is italics and smaller, and this is larger, but I don't like those fonts. If I do the fonts drop down, then I can scroll through these and see what the different fonts look like until I come up with a font that I like too. So in that way, I can kind of modify the themes and the style from the home page so that I end up with something that I like. And all of those things are there on the Design tab. Okay, what else can I do on the Design tab? I have, for example, 2 paragraphs here. And you'll notice that there is a little bit of space in between them. I can't click on that space to type anything there, but there's space between there. Suppose that I want the spacing between paragraphs to be more or less in my entire document. I do that on the Design tab under Paragraph Spacing. If I drop down paragraph spacing, I can set it to no paragraph spacing, and you see how my paragraph now has no space in between this paragraph and that paragraph. Or I can set it to compact, tight, open, relaxed, and double. So those are my built-in spaces between paragraphs. And if I change paragraph spacing here, then that changes it for the entire document. Okay, what else can I do on the Design tab? I can change the page color. So if I want this page to show up to the reader as this god-awful yellow, it's really a pretty yellow, but I sure wouldn't want my eyes to have to look at that and then read. But anyway, I can pick whatever color I want. Now, that won't necessarily print. If you send this page to the printer, it depends on your print settings whether the page color will print along with, and turn the paper that comes out of the printer to this background shade. The reason for that is because color ink costs a fortune, and by default, this is not going to print. You would have to mess with your print settings in order to make it print the background color. Okay, what else can I do on the Design tab? I can put in page borders. If I click on page borders, I can see that the default is none. I can put in a box border, and if I do that, then you see it puts in a border around all four sides of the page. I can put in a shadow border, and if I choose that, you can see that it still is on all four, but on this side it's a little bit thicker, kind of gives it the illusion that there's a shadow behind the border. I can choose 3-dimensional, which with the thickness that I've got this set at isn't real obvious, but it does kind of look like it's beveled, like it stands out a little bit. Or I can do a custom border. I can not only put a border around it, but I can choose whether the border is dotted, solid like it was, or dashed and dotted, or it gets a little bit fancier. I can change how wide it comes out, and I can also change the color. So there I have a blue 3-lined border in Midway blue all the way around my page. So that is page borders. And that's pretty much everything there is to the Design tab. Let's go over to the Page Layout tab. On the Page Layout tab, there are multiple things that you can do. I'm first going to show you the spacing here. Remember when I was on the Design tab, if I went to paragraph spacing and played around with it, I could change the spacing between these two paragraphs. And remember I said that would change the spacing for the entire document. But what if I just wanted to change the spacing and make it different between these two paragraphs, just these two, not the whole document, but just these two? I would do that on the Page Layout tab here under spacing. If I choose after, then that tells me how many spaces this paragraph is going to go down when I hit enter. If I choose before, then that tells me how many spaces it's going to put between this point right here, the N, and what's above it. Either way, I'm going to get space between these two paragraphs. So if I put my cursor right here and choose before, then you see I can increase or decrease the amount of space between these two paragraphs. And that's only going to affect these two paragraphs. Okay, let's look at what else there is on the Page Layout tab. One of the most important things on the Page Layout tab is the margins. Margins define where you can start typing. So by default, your margins are 1 inch on the top, 1 inch on the left-hand side, 1 inch on the bottom, 1 inch on the right-hand side. So in other words, a 1-inch margin all the way around here. And you can see where the margin is set by these little triangles and the box right here. So that, in line with that, is where I'll be able to start typing. And you can see the right-hand margin by this little triangle right here. So in line with that is where you will be forced to stop typing. Sometimes you need larger or smaller margins. Like for example, suppose I was trying to make a flyer and I wanted to use as much of the paper as I could and not leave that 1-inch border, 1-inch margin all the way around the page. Then I could choose the narrow margins, and you see how much more room it allows me to type in. Sometimes, like for example, if I'm typing something that's going to be published, like a dissertation or something for a journal that I'm submitting to, they tell me that I have to use particular margins. For example, ones with a 2-inch margin on the left and a 2-inch margin on the right for binding. So I might choose this, and you see how it makes things more narrow. Or I can choose custom margins. And if I do that, it lets me say, okay, 1 inch margin on the top and bottom is fine. 1 inch on the right is fine. But I need 2 inches over here for binding. So if I click OK, then that leaves me with 2 inches right here, and it puts this margin back over to normal. So then that leaves the bookbinder space so that your left-hand side of all your paragraphs doesn't get cut off. Sometimes you'll have to specify your margins. It is best to go to the page layout tab and margins and either pick one of these defaults or make a custom margin. But it is possible to just grab this little box and drag it over, or grab this little box and drag it over. But you can see why that isn't necessarily the best thing to do, because it didn't grab everything. It only grabbed the paragraph I was on. So when I adjust things by dragging these guys, it usually starts getting really annoying where I have to try to figure out, well, why did it do this and why did it do that? But sometimes that's just what you've got to do. Okay, what else can you do on the page layout tab? On this tab, you've also got your page orientation. So do you want this to print portrait? In other words, so that the words run down the long side of the page? Or do you want it to print landscape? There may be a time when you're making a flyer that you would prefer for it to print landscape. So on the page layout tab under orientation, that's where you change that. You also may want to dictate the size of your paper. If you've got legal size paper or tabloid size paper in your printer, then you may want to choose tabloid. Tabloid is 11 by 17 is especially good when you're making a 3-fold flyer. So you just got to make sure you've got 11 by 17 paper in your printer, and then you can make your flyer, and this is a really good size for making it a trifold flyer. So that's always a possibility from this page. And then the last thing that I'll go ahead and call attention to on this page, suppose that I wanted a new page right here between these two paragraphs. There's 2 ways I can do that. I can hold down Control on my keyboard and hit Enter. If I do that, then that automatically creates a new page. But if I want to do it with a mouse click, I can go to the page layout tab and I can put in a page break, and it puts it in there for me. Remember, if I don't want to keep the thing that I just did, I just go up here to this arrow and I can back out of it. Let's go ahead and look at the View tab in this video as well, because there's very little on that we need to look at, and then we can just knock that out and not have to have a separate video. So on the View tab, the most important thing here is the ruler. If you turn the ruler off, then you see that that gives you a different view. You can't see where your margins are. And that's fine a lot of the time when you're typing and you're just working along. You don't need to see that. But sometimes you want to adjust your margins by dragging those little boxes or triangles. And so to get that back, you go over to the View tab and you click on the ruler, and it puts the ruler here and it puts a ruler here. So if I wanted to change how high I can type, I can drag that up too. Drag up on that side. Okay. Another thing that might be useful on this tab is the View. You can view your document as one page. If this were a multiple page document, I could view the pages side by side. And sometimes if I want to view the document a little bit bigger or smaller because I'm trying to fit more onto my screen for whatever reason, I can click on Zoom and I can choose to view it at 200%, which zooms in and makes me scroll around using my scroll bars to see the whole document. But if it's got itty bitty text, that can sometimes be useful. Or if I'm trying to see more of my page, I could choose 75%, and that scrolls it out and makes it smaller so I can see more part of the document. Or I can click 100% there to go back. And also under Zoom, I could do a custom size. Those are the most important things on the View tab that you need to worry about.